Yes, we are ready.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our participants from all around the world. It's a great situation that we're in. It's a great world that we're in, and we're together fighting against a great pandemic. The Value Chain Capacity Building Network for the Asia and the Pacific, a grant from IFAD, has been working collaboratively with different organizations and agencies to support the fight back of our agricultural market systems. And it's very important because it's tied to our food security, it's tied to our livelihood, and it's also tied to the poverty alleviation strategies of the countries that we are working in. We have been engaging with different stakeholders through our webinars, and this is the third round of our webinar series. And today, I can see that we already have 112 participants joining from all around the world. I am Mohammad Rubaiyat Sarwar, Chairman, the Value Chain Capacity Building Network for the Asia and the Pacific, and I'm also the Managing Director of Innovation Consulting Private Limited, one of the members of the network. I've kept myself against the video because my network was not doing good, but here am I, you can see my face now. But I can move out of video anytime to keep my network moving. So today we have with me a great panel of speakers, and they would be talking about the issues that we want to talk about. I have with me, as you know, today's session is about agricultural services, and we believe this is a very important topic that we need to talk about, because it's about how we keep the agricultural market systems moving. How do we make sure that the essential services are reaching out to the poor farmers all across the country in a situation when transportation, logistics, etc., can't move because of the shutdown that is continuing in most of the countries that are affected by the pandemic. Today, we have with us Ms. Mary Ott Even. She is the Senior Regional Technical Specialist, Agronomy for Asia and the Pacific at IFAD. We have with us Dr. Rashid Sulaiman from the Agriculture Extension South Asia, and member of GFRAS. We have Mr. Stuart Morris, Director, East-West Seas Knowledge Transfer. We have Mr. Hutashin Fimashan. He's the Secretary of the Lao Farmers Network. We have Mr. Carl Larson, Executive Secretary, GFRS. And then we have Augustus Sampang Suting, General Manager, Meghalaya Basin Management Agency. Without further ado, I would like to start the webinar. My first question to the speakers is about how the COVID pandemic is influencing the need for services, the quantity and content of it, and what are the consequences of limited access to and availability of services to respond to those needs. I would first request Mr. Stewart to shed some light on this issue. Stuart, over to you, please.
May I ask that Tuan to turn on the PowerPoint with the questions?
Okay, so thank you for letting me join the webinar. So it's a great pleasure to be here. If we could flick to the next slide, please. Thanks. So I think we need to keep in mind, you know, in general, populations, especially in developing economies, eating relatively low amounts of fruit and vegetable. In most developing economies, I think the rate is less than 50% of what is recommended by WHO. So if you think now in times of COVID, when we're all told we need fruit and vegetables to boost our immune systems, kind of like now is more important than ever that we fill ourselves up with fresh fruit and vegetables. But the problem is the vegetables, it's very slow and painful access to the markets at the moment because of the effects of COVID. The economy, it's been badly shaken, and the people that are going to suffer more than anyone because of the effect on the economy is smallholder farmers. Now more than ever, they really need to ensure that they can get a really steady income for their family. And to do that, they need a steady source of good quality farm inputs, and they need knowledge in order to use those farm inputs correctly. So in terms of farm inputs, we're working in Asia and Africa, and in the countries we're working in, we see in most countries access to inputs, it's hindered, but it hasn't stopped. In some countries, it actually flows reasonably okay. For example, in India, it's a bit fragmented. The agro-input dealers, they're open on alternate days, and then they have restricted hours. And what we see a lot in Africa is that the agro-input dealers have simply not been able to replenish their supplies. And then, of course, you've got the problem of the farmers getting to the agro-input dealers anyway with restricted movement. In terms of access to information or extension services, I think bar India, in all the countries we're working in, we've got exemption from the government or from local authorities that our extension teams can still be active in the field. And I think that goes for a lot of other extension teams out there. A lot of governments are also actively pushing that extension remains in place. But of course, the outreach is limited with social distancing. You can't do extension like we knew it before. The prices of vegetables, it varies drastically from country to country. In most countries, we're seeing the farmers are able to sell vegetables, but at a very low price. Hence, they're going to have a much lower income this season. The one exception, Cambodia, which interestingly shut down the border with Vietnam. I don't know if it's continuous or just temporary. But Vietnam used to export a lot of vegetables into Cambodia. So that's actually been quite good for their local Cambodian farmers. But in other countries, it's not like that. In India, Bangladesh, you see farmers not being able to get the vegetables to the markets at all in some cases, literally dumping in the fields. In most cases, farmers are able to sell vegetables, but as I say, at a much lower price. And then you've got the added problem of the increased impact to post-harvest. If you can't shift your vegetables quickly to the markets, the quality drops very rapidly. And that's what we see at the moment. The farmers selling locally, they get a lower price, but they can sell, but they can't sell the volumes that they used to sell. We believe this is going to have significant impact in the coming seasons. We don't know for how long. I think it's a bit of a guessing game at the moment, but we're assuming a lot of farmers are going to struggle for the available cash to invest into the following crop cycles. And that's sort of compounding that is the uncertainty of markets. They're not sure, are markets going to open up again? Is there going to be more freedom of movement, transportation, etc.? And if all this happens, that's going to have actually quite dire consequence, not just for the farmers, but for the populations in those countries, the consumers. And as I said at the beginning of the slide, what we need now actually is fresh vegetables to eat for our immune systems. So if we're not going to get that, that's going to impact us all. And I think the biggest impacts will be in poorer areas. Thanks.
Ubayat, are you there?
Trying to unmute. It takes some time to mute and unmute. Sorry, before I move on to the next speaker, Stuart, very quick question. So from East-West Seed, where did you see an uptick in demand? Has there been a specific uptick in demand for any kinds of inputs in different countries?
You know, as a company, we're obviously very concerned, you know, is it going to impact also our markets, other agro-input markets? But in terms of demand, it's quite interesting. There's quite a high demand for vegetable seed. The problem is getting the seed for farmers to access. As I say, some input dealers, they aren't able to replenish their stores. And we're not sure what's going to happen the next season. Are farmers going to simply plant less? There's a lot of unknown factors out there.
So you're saying that there is demand, but you're not being able to reach out to, but also you said that different countries are approaching it in different ways. So in India, for example, they have alternate days of opening. In some countries, the extension system is still going on. So it's very country specific. In Africa, you were saying that, I mean, it's not, I mean, they're not being able to replenish. So you're still trying to figure out what would be the strategy to get to the farmers. So there you're saying that no strategy hasn't been fixed yet. Am I right on that?
Yeah, sure. But I think that we don't market directly seeds. We sell through local, just distribution channels, local agro input dealers, and we've approach anyway is to get to that last mile if we can with seeds. So sometimes we're selling seeds in very remote areas, but I think the core problem is actually the markets. If the markets are there, farmers will serve that market, but it's the markets which are really making people uncertain what to do for the future.
Yes, and also you highlighted that the future is so uncertain that it's very difficult to predict the cash-starved farmers, whether they're going to buy or not. So that's something that you highlighted. So that's a concern from East West East side, right?
Yeah, and I mean, not necessarily looking at our business. It's a concern for the smallholder farmers. If they can't afford the inputs for the next crop cycle, or if they can only afford, say, half those inputs, it means their income in the future is getting lower and lower, and they're struggling anyway. I mean, it's going to hit them really hard.
I think that's a very natural progression then to Putashin. Putashin, if you're there, you're the secretary of the Lao Farmers Network, and what Stuart is saying that the supply chain for the inputs have been disrupted, and the farmers are not getting access to it even when they're demanding it. So that must have some implication on the farmers' ability to produce. So from your side, please shed some light. How is it happening in Laos?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to be part of this very important discussion. I will come back to Mr. Stuart's issue on the input and the next cropping season. But therefore, may I give you some example of the situation and the need of services that our members are requesting. First of all, there are many farmer groups cannot sell their produce. For example, a group of about 30 members who grow cabbage. Normally, they sell about 800 tons of cabbage in April. But due to the virus pandemic, they cannot sell at all. So 1 month alone, they already lost over $100,000. So meaning that there's a big problem in terms of the normal market, normal buyers. And when we look at the market, we can see that there are two main group of buyers. The first one is you and I, and everybody who is the household market. And this one also consume less than before because they are more careful in spending money. They lost income, so they don't want to spend a lot of money. But the fact that they cannot organize party, wedding, religion ceremony, so they also don't buy a lot of fresh vegetables, fruits, or meat. But when we look at the tourist sector, the restaurant, the hotel, who buy a large volume of vegetable and fruit every day with a regular amount, that sector also completely lost. So no, meaning that the more normal buyers are not there. So many farmer groups who already invested and hope to or plan to sell to them cannot sell anymore. That the problem. So in addition to that, the transportation also another big problem, because of the pandemic, so many areas are restricted and not prohibited for movement, even though some government allow to transport goods, but there are many regulations, and farmers have to apply many whether the permits and do health checks in order to comply with regulations. So many people get up in comply to the requirement in order to transport the goods. Because that of the lack of transport services available, then the transport cost also higher, adding up more cost for farmer to transport the goods. So can you see the main problem? The market is not there. Nobody buy products like before, and the transport very difficult. Because of this many, there are the need. Farmer need different support services in short term, in immediate, in urgent, urgently, and also in long term. For the what farmer need and immediately is that the many farmer group now ready to harvest, right? But nobody buying the products that ready to harvest. They have not many choice. One to left the produce rotten or throw away, or secondly have to process to something else or storaging it. So the farmer need us to help them to look for buyers to buy immediately, or otherwise need to process or somehow to keep them and sell later. Secondly, immediately need to facilitate the transportation of goods of agriculture products to make it the transport services available and cheaper, or if not cheaper, than back to the normal price. And many farmers, the poor farmer, the landless farmers, those also, some of them need food pack, because they lost income, they cannot buy food for their family. So we need to consider supporting for those who really need food pack in order to survive during the lockdown in many areas. That's for the immediate support that needed. For the short term, I mean for the next circle of the crop, of the production, I think what farmer need is not only the input, the seeds, but they need information on what to produce and who will buy, because they cannot sell what they normally produce, right? Because the normal regular buyers are stopping buying from them. So we need a really precise and up-to-date market information system that clearly shows in each area on who will buy with the produce, on what price, and then we need to train help farmer to realize the cost of production, because this is something new. They never produced before. So
Okay.
So we need to help them doing economic analysis and to see the cost of production, and then the access to input will need to come later, and then training on production techniques. That are type of services that needed in the short term, in particularly for the next production circle.
Okay, Puchachi, if I may interrupt here, so for the sake of the time, I will get back to you again. So, but I think, I mean, a very important point that you're saying is the need for information. You're talking about, let's say, farmers need to know what to produce in the next
Yes.
crop cycle. They need to know who would be buying it. But also attached to it, you're saying that the transportation system has been disrupted. There's no storage system. We do not know who will be buying it, and they're not
Right.
coming to us. So if all these systems are not, let's say, addressed at the same time, then the farmers, they will continue to lose. And you have given a very specific example of how the cabbage farmers have lost 100,000 US dollars, and that's massive, right? So you are really saying that this is the call for the time to find out how to do it. But I take you on that point that the information need, I think that's a very important point about how do we make this information available across the agricultural market systems, right?
Just one word, and we need to do everything fast.
Yes.
Now or tomorrow,
I mean,
and not next 6 months or next 1 year.
Yes,
we need to respond it now and as fast as possible.
Right. I mean, forgive me for laughing, but indeed it's because of that. Because I mean, we just have 24 hours a day. But I know, I mean, there are people who can't sleep and they're working 16 hours a day just to find out how to do it, and there are innovations taking place. I mean, I will move on to Sachin, to the next speaker, but to my audience, the attendees from all around the world, you're all listening, and you all probably have some examples and insights on how you're addressing this issue. So say, for example, this point that I'm raising about information, how do you make information available to the farmers about what to produce, and then who would be buying it, how to solve this transportation challenge? So we'd be delighted if you also shared your reflection on the Q&A box. That Q&A box helps us to also document your messages, but the chat box doesn't. So please make use of the Q&A box. You can raise question, but you can also, I mean, provide some reflection on the point that we're raising. And to my panelists, when we're speaking, if you could please continue to answer to the questions. You don't have to be the speaker who have just completed the speech, but please look at the Q&A box and continue to respond to those questions. I will now move on to my third speaker on this issue, Rashid Sulaiman, Dr. Rashid Sulaiman from Agriculture Extension South Asia. You are from Meghalaya, and India, as I was hearing, is responding to this issue differently. And we know that the case of COVID is escalating in India at this present. So how is India responding to this, to this new need for services? What are the consequences? How are you tackling these issues? Yeah, over to you, Rashid.
Okay, can you move the slide? Can you, okay. Actually, you know, much has been discussed in the last two presentations on what is the impact of COVID-19. For example, I think everywhere, including India, we have the issue of reduced market access. This has led to crop loss and reduced prices. And we all know the reasons. One is the kind of the COVID scare. So that kept many of the markets closed. And another is the kind of a lockdown. And people face the problem of lack of trucks to transport because the transporters were not sure about the police, you know, stopping the trucks not in the way, though the government has said that agriculture is exempted from the lockdown regulations, reduce availability of labor for harvesting and marketing. And another major problem is a lack of information on the markets. Where is the demand? Who is basically going to buy it? Where the trucks are available? So because of all these reasons, I think the agricultural suffered. And another issue is the reduced access to services, veterinary services, for instance. Livestock keepers were not able to take the livestock to the veterinary hospitals. The supply of milk was affected, as Stuart also said, because there have been a problem of accessing inputs. In India, at least fortunately, this is the time when most of the problems have been in the harvesting, because India is basically in this is the season where the harvesting, and then there is a demand for inputs basically slowly building up. And there have been also limited access to advisory services. It is not that the government is not permitting the extension workers to go to the kind of a field, because in most places, because they have the government officer, they have the kind of the card, they have the identity card, they could move. But then lack of transport has impacted them. Then you cannot have face-to-face meetings, which they used to do earlier. I think so because of all these kind of a thing, there is a lot of loss in terms of the farmers lost in terms of their quantity, the produce got lost, and they also got reduced prices. And there's an empirical study recently from Orissa, which basically talks about from per hectare loss of in Indian rupees, which they are talking about 3,000 to 3 lakh, coming to something like a $50 for these are the lucky people who have lost only that much because they only got a reduced price and they could sell it. But it is ranges from $50 to $4,000 per hectare. So this has implications on the cash at hand and inputs to buy during the next season. But I think the less discussed issue is basically it's the impact on food consumption. So there has been a recent study conducted by different 6 civil society organizations in 10 states in India that this has an implication on the consumption. And they say that I think at least in the rural India, I think there are 50% of the rural India is eating less. And they also talk about the figures that 68% have reduced their food consumption and about 50% have basically eating less number of times. So this has a lot of implications on the nutrition side, which is also another area which has been impacted. Farmers have been looking for, clearly they need information on what they can sell, where is the demand, can we send it for direct sale to the consumers, where these kind of places where the government has allowed people to come and bring their produce and sell it, quantity, quality, demand, and the transport. What is the kind of the transport? What are the mechanisms and what type of approvals are needed? Because they need a lot of approvals sometimes to transport goods from one district to other, maybe from the local administration, maybe from the district administration, maybe police, and how to access inputs and credits. Though there have been recently there have been a lot of relaxations, but I think finally when we look at it, those who have benefited from the lockdown are basically farmers organized as effective as farmer producer groups, farmer clubs, and they have access to a lot of social media. They can access WhatsApp. They are already formed into groups. And the third is where government and extension marketing agencies acted quickly. In some states where they have basically formed crisis management groups with officials. So this is how. So only those people who have benefited, but I think there's a larger number of people who are still suffering from the lack of information and lack of markets. Advisory services try to help. Initially, it was all about sending advisories on crop advisory, health advisory, washing hands, maintaining social distance, what are the practices to grow. But I personally feel EAS could have done much more, which it has not done. I think I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Rashid. Thank you. This is brilliant. I think the last 4 points that you say here is so interesting. You're talking about there are few groups of people who were probably benefiting, farmers who are organized, who have access to social media, where the government extension is working proactively, and linking the producers to consumer traders and use of ICTs. I think we'll be covering the ICT in the next point. But if I bridge the 3 discussions that you are having, from East-West Seaside, what you are saying is that there is definitive disruption, there is uncertainty about the future, and there are lots of issues with regards to transportation and so on and so forth, which means that the services and the inputs, these are not reaching the farmers. And then we heard from also that there are information requirement, and without that, without access to markets, knowing about the markets, the farmers will be hugely affected. But now in your slide, you're giving us a cue. You are giving us a clue that probably if these variables are present, then the effect would be low. I would ask my participants in this webinar to reflect on that, because over decades, we have worked with farmer groups, we have worked on organizing associations, we have worked in building relationships between extension service providers and the farmers. So this might have some impact. So it would be good to see those. Having the next part of the discussion, which is my question 2, and Rashid exactly ended there. He spoke about ICT as a tool to address some of these problems that we are talking about. So the question is, what digital remote service delivery models are evolving as coping mechanism to current restrictions, and what are early lessons in terms of success factors? Once again, Stuart, I would invite you to start.
Okay,
Stuart,
sorry.
are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Sorry, Stuart, I mean, just to interrupt, when you move on, to all my panelists, there are lots of questions piling up. Please start responding to those questions. You can directly answer in those questions. Otherwise, we would not be able to really take, benefit of those questions that are being asked. So Stuart, over to you.
Okay, thanks. If you could flick to the next slide, please. Well, before talking about a bit about digital, which is really sort of hot on everyone's agenda at the moment, just stepping back a bit to how we've done extension for the last, well, 20 odd years, actually. We take a very sort of field-based approach. We have an approach where we train key farmers and then peer-to-peer learning. So we're using a key farmer who we support, and then the information is disseminated through that key farmer, through demonstrations, through trainings, etc. So it means a lot of intensive support from in-field extension. And with COVID coming along, of course, with social distancing, you can't do that. With the exemption that we've got from most governments, most of our teams can still go to the field now. But instead of going to bigger groups of farmers, calling a group of 30 farmers around the farm and looking at how to transplant a tomato seedling, for example, we now have to go one-to-one. To make that more effective, we're looking where possible at family units, because a lot of the families, it's not just a one-person job. Many of the family are involved. So that sort of widens the breadth a bit, but it's compared to what we used to do. Our outreach is very limited. So we can keep we can maintain a good presence with some of the key farmers, but limitations also in some areas of travel. You can't get to some key farmers. And what do we do now? We use a lot of WhatsApp. So I know it's not a very good picture, but if you look at the picture, the middle picture on the top row there, a lot of our staff are using WhatsApp to directly steer key farmers so we can maintain the demonstrations. So the farmer will turn on the phone, walk around the field, etc., and then they'll say what needs doing, what the problem is. And the idea is that we can maintain those demonstration farms, those peer-led demonstration farms, because we truly believe the neighbours in the village are still making use of that. Even if there's no direct training organised on that farm, people are observing, people are looking over the fence, people are asking the key farmer. We've also stepped up efforts on farmer-to-farmer extension, not just from the demonstrations which I was just describing, but farmers going deeper into the communities. So we do that through key farmers and through village extension agents, like volunteers. So the picture on the bottom row, the left-hand picture, the lady there, she's actually a village volunteer. I think that's in Odisha, that one there, in India. So we have a large amount of village volunteers that we pay them a small allowance, we train them, we give them a bag of crop guides. And the very nice thing is actually, a lot of them, they are women. And why are they women? Because there's not so many opportunities for women. When you talk to them, a lot of them will say, I've never had the opportunity to train before, to be recognized before. So it's quite a nice gender thing coming out there, actually. On terms of radio and podcasts, and people have been using radio for a long time. We actually never looked too much into radio until fairly recently. And in some countries, it's definitely a no-go, or potentially probably a no-go. But in some countries like Nigeria and Uganda, radio is exceedingly popular. So like in northern Nigeria, we have a broadcast once a week in Hausa language, which actually goes much wider than Nigeria, goes up into Niger and cuts across some other borders. And it seems to be exceedingly popular. So you have like a 30-minute session. It's all sort of modulated. So this week we talk about seedling. Next week we talk about transplant, etc., etc. And then there's a call in at the end of it, and a lot of interaction. It's amazing. And if you were pre-COVID, when we started working on the radio, we noticed a lot of farmers, they also record from the radio, and then they sit back and listen to it again with their friends, which I found is quite encouraging. So I think radio has got huge potential to push further in some countries. And then digital media, or the sort of the digital media everyone likes, the social media. We've been looking at this, or we've been sort of sat on the fence, if I'm honest, for many years. But I guess about a year, 18 months, 2 years ago, we started looking more seriously in it. But still, we needed a push. And I'm honestly glad to say that that's one positive thing that's come out of COVID for us. It forced us to look at digital media, to take it seriously. So, for example, using Facebook, you have your platforms and then you have your groups. What we see is on the groups where you have that interaction between the farmers. When the farmers can post something on there, it's much more likely to generate interest because you have that farmer-to-farmer advice given there. If it's on a platform, it's a bit stagnant in a way. Our experience in India and Nigeria, that just in the month of November, both of our Facebook groups doubled in size. So Nigeria ramped up from, I think, 3,000 to 6,000 members just in 1 month. We're piloting also on Facebook, but can be obviously done on other platforms, what we call reality farming, or basically having a demo farm where we can make short films, pictures, comments, and you follow the crop cycle through and you post that continuously through the crop cycle. I think it's got high potential because you don't just show the nice side. Farming's not always nice. Sometimes there's a flood, there's a drought, there's pest and disease instances which sometimes get out of control. And people will see that. And if farmers see the reality, they also have much more trust for it. And if you have that environment of trust, people listen more. So we're piloting that in Cambodia and Thailand. And then from the Philippines, piloting webinars. And I always think of webinars as being these sort of, like we're sat in now, like a two-hour session. And sometimes they can be very dry, actually. I hope this one isn't. But what we did in the Philippines is making 4 to 5 minute webinars once a week on set topics. And again, getting a lot of interest. So something we also want to upscale on. And just a couple more points. Using mobiles, even the old Nokia phones, the old feature phones. We've launched, or we're piloting an initiative with a company called Funzy, where we've uploaded our training modules, which we usually use on a village level, face-to-face with farmers. We've put them in a format where they can be accessed. You still need an internet connection, but it's data-free. And then farmers download, they go through a series of presentations, videos, etc., etc. And then they have quizzes throughout it, and they have to get the answers right before they can move on. And at the end of the modules, they get a certificate, and big potential, I think. And this is not just for COVID. We see things like that are forcing us to look at things now, which hopefully after COVID, we will invest a lot more into in the future. And then traditional crop guides. People like to forget those, I think, talking about digital media. The picture, bottom picture, you'll see the crop guides there and an input dealer in Indonesia. And we do that in all countries. We print crop guides. It's just essential information. And the way we format the crop guides, we've developed them over the years, discussing with farmers about the pictures, what they understand by them, etc. And our experience of farmers, the feedback we get from farmers, most farmers prefer that very traditional sort of information than they do looking at a screen. And I think that's something to consider when everyone's jumping into the digital media thing at the moment. Don't forget those very effective but traditional methods out there. Thanks.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. Brilliant. I think, there are lots of suggestions and examples that that people around the world can make use of. A few questions from my side. I would have a 15 minutes Q&A session after this part of the webinar for the two questions that we're discussing. But one question to you right away is that in all of this, you are disseminating information on agriculture, but this is also a health problem. So if the farmers are not essentially, I mean, keeping them protected from COVID, then your, I mean, extension solution is not going to work as well. So how are you addressing that issue? Are you also giving information through digital media on what the farmers should be doing to keep them protected against COVID?
Yeah, so not just through digital, but when we do have our sort of boots on the ground, when our extension teams are still able to get to the fields, it's one of the things that they're continuously doing is talking about social distancing and why. It's like often a government will say you have to be 2 meters apart, and people thinking, why have I got to do that? People need to know the rationale behind things. And simple things like the hand sanitation, you see that, and it's beautiful. You see it in villages in northern Nigeria, these little like containers with a little tap underneath, or one that you can tip for sanitizing hands. And that we try to introduce things, but still our expertise and what we're trying to do is train farmers on vegetable production. So it's a matter of sort of embedding it in there without losing the vegetable production side of it.
But probably partnership there could work. Let's say an agency that works on awareness.
Absolutely.
And you, if you could two come together and through your channel, those messages I put forward, that would help. I would move on, Stuart. So thank you so much. But please take note of the questions that are coming up, because I'll be getting back with a 15 minutes Q&A session with all of you. So Mary, I'm going to you now. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely clearly. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
So we are having a very exciting discussion. So Stuart has highlighted what East West Seas is doing, but also he has, I mean, from his experience from around the world, like what is happening in Nigeria, he has brought forward some examples. So over to you, Mary and Augustus together. So, so shed us some light on how you are using digital solutions to address some of these challenges.
Thank you very much. So as you said, we are sharing the presentation with Augustus because I felt it was useful to have really a concrete case scenario of a project and how it had dealt. So I'll just go very, very quickly over the kind of interventions and adaptation that we've seen across IFAD portfolio for this adaptation of the extension system, not our overall response. First, as mentioned, a lot of new needs arise. So the mandate of some of these extension workers and the people responsible for extension and service delivery had to change and adapt. The first thing is, because of the lockdown, as it's been said, we had to get live update on the real issues and needs on the ground. And that has been a big focus also on how do we get what is going on and what are the core needs and how do we respond to that. And apart from that, as has been said in the first part, a lot was to deal with how do we solve this logistics issue? How do we get the path for people to move? How do we bridge some of this information gap, because some of the services have disappeared? As you mentioned just previously, part of it has been also to converge because we are financing government-owned projects. So of course, convergence and collaboration with government is key. So there's been a lot of collaboration and convergence with also enhancing the messaging around COVID safety measures, both for health of the farmers, but also to enhance food safety along the value chain and avoid transmissions. And of course, trying to respond to a number of other social, finance, and health crises and trying to get on it. And fourthly, as been said also by the Lao farmer, and among the questions that were raised, new demands came because we couldn't get necessarily imported seeds or seed from other states, or because some of the inputs were not there. There's been more demand in trying to, how do we get with the local seeds, barter exchange between village, how do we go for more nutrition, fresh vegetables, home garden, and as it's been mentioned, because market was delayed, a lot of demand also on how do we handle better post-harvest loss and so on. So adaptation of the mandate and trying to be reactive to the needs. Second part, of course, has been to an increasing use of the digital tools. I won't go in details because Stuart has already said a lot, and I'm sure Rashid will say a lot. And as has been mentioned, the basic ones have been the most used first. So WhatsApp, Facebook, getting live exchange has been key. Then the project that already had a number of video, message, SMS advisory, or stepping up hotline has been key to be able to still give the message. Some more advanced had geomapping, tracing, alert system that has been very useful also to better alert and get a grasp of the situation. Then, of course, as it's been said, there has been a lot of market problems and how to access the inputs, the supplies. So the role of specialized app or ICT platform, e-commerce has stepped up. And overall, as IFAD, of course, we've adopted an ICT for development strategy last year, and we are stepping up more and more to invest more in this digital world and see how it can improve extension and agriculture. But IFAD's main mandate is on the rural poor and targeting the most remote areas. So obviously there are a number of limits to the use and the access of these ICT tools. So as been mentioned by Stuart, actually the use of radio and TV and mobile van has been also very useful. My colleague Putso is part of the participants and she was sharing this experience from Malawi, I think, where they've been using mobile van to be able to bring all the way to the village radio and TV messages about pests and diseases and price and COVID health. So we have to be innovative to reach, those who can't even afford credit or have mobile phone. Secondly, as been highlighted by Stuart, trust is key. And farmers usually learn better from their peers. So it's not only about an app that they will believe if there is an exchange across. And on top, it's not only about getting the information, they have to be able to get organized locally to innovate and respond to these issues. So what I highlight on the bottom of my screen in yellow is that I think the success of the projects and to be able to respond effectively has depended both on the availability of these tools, but also on the ability to engage and support decentralized outreach system. Strong local organizations and partnership, like said by Stuart, this role of lead farmer, farmer to farmer, having youth, village and producers organization, local information center, or bridging on volunteers because most extension agents couldn't move. So, and not all farmers have mobile phones. So the key point has been able to be sure that you had contact point that could connect to other farmers who were disconnected and ensure this last mile access and having partnership and coordination. I've talked too much, so now I just want to give really the floor to the very interesting experience from the LAMP project in India.
Yes, August, it's over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Hello. Yeah. Okay. So, well, just as climate change is here to stay, COVID pandemic also is here to stay, and we need to be having a coping and adaptation strategy on how we tackle with these issues at the grassroots. Well, we tried with our, using the SMS modules, the telephone that we have, the mobile connections. And it's an acid test for us as a community to see how information will flow, how IT, information technology, which is the need of the hour now, can be used. And we tried first with using phone calls, then there was no way to record it. Then we started with SMS message, and later we started looking at WhatsApp, which is the in thing now, where we start developing different WhatsApp group, and we have a market linkages, we have the rural finance linkages of the project, we have, which is anchored by the knowledge management team, and these messages were coming, and you can see on the right side of the screen, you can see the messages. It was mostly on how do we sell the produce, as our earlier speakers have been talking about producers not being able to reach to the market. The market is in the cities, the market is without any food produced, while the village has surplus. There was a vacuum created at the cities and towns where there are no vegetables at all. In village there is surplus. How do we connect the dots? And that's where we use the SMS module, the WhatsApp, and now we are adapting to it. We are starting to look at video conferencing. The way we are doing it with you, with the team now, we are doing it with our team, but it's still in a very nascent stage. And it will take some time for us to actually use IT at the grassroots level. And go to the next slide, please. The next slide shows that there in the Directorate of Agriculture, way back in December 2017, we started an initiative known as the I-Team 1917, where we have the agri-response centers, where you have the farmers and the traders have registered. Those have registered with us. We asked our team to go and call this 1917 toll-free number, where they get in the advisories, which is manned by the ICO, the incoming communication officer, who looks in at address the issues of the farmers at their level, and then try to give in the advisories on market intelligence. And then if they are produced, there are the agri-response vehicle that are being sent to these farm, because this is a government project, so clearances was not an issue. They already have the clearances to move on specific locations. These are connected with GPRS, so we know where these vehicles are going. We have a control room at the head office, in the headquarters. And then in case the traders are already in the registration with the I-Team, so there's a connection between the quantity the traders want and the quantity the farmer produces. The job of the ARC is to network again with these. And then in case the first level officers are not able to address the issues of the officers of the farmers from the field, we have the second level officers, the subject matter specialists stationed for this purpose. This is the way that we have collaborated with the Directorate of Agriculture, Government of Meghalaya, on how to address the issues in the field. The next slide that we can go, please. Now, at the field level, this is where the whole foundation of the services that needs to be delivered. Well, as all have rightly said, extension officers could not move anywhere outside their area of operation, the lockdown. But in the earlier project and in this project, we have trained para-professionals whom we call as community resource persons, and this training has been very useful for the community. The para-vets have been able to understand how to do silage for the produce, because no feeds were coming in from the village, from the towns and cities to the villages. So they were knowing how to use root and tubers, how to use the feed, that the mix that can be done so that the animal are taken care of. And with the emergence of swine flu that has come in the northeastern region of India, these services which the extension could not do. Then, in regard to the role of the agri community resource person, how we have undertaken the training of farmers on sustainable green technologies and how to do conservation of seeds, how to make your own biofertilizers and biopesticides. This has helped them in getting the much needed manure that is not being given by the concerned retailer or wholesaler of the normal externally inputs that they usually get. And the third is we are also looking, and if you look at the slide, in the down part of the slide, you will see that we're trying to teach the farmers about how to do the packaging of the produce, because they bring it in baskets. By the time it reaches the towns and cities, half the vegetables are rotten. We have scientifically shown them how to use the plastic crate so that they can stay over a longer period of time during transportation. This concept, community resource persons, the usage has been put fully in this COVID pandemic. The things that we are looking at, how do we translate information technology to the community, how to be innovative, that the training, the actual training that happens in the village, how do we transmit it? We are developing tools for this. I won't be able to share it now. We're developing innovation way of how to remotely train our resource person at the village, not being able to come to the state institutes. So these are the questions that I look at.
Thank you, Mr. Augustus. Thank you so much. This is a great example of how technology could probably solve some of the crises, and it connects to the challenge that Pusachin from Laos identified, which is access to information. And the 1917, I'm not wrong, right? That's your hotline number, right? So people can call there and then they can get information, or they can register about their products, and then you can give the permits and the products can be transported. So you are centrally managing the system. Did I understand you right?
Yes, yes.
So Mr. Augustus, one question before I move on to Rashid is how many farmers did you serve and how long it has been since the project started?
So, well, I will not be able to give you the number of farmers that we have been able to look in now at this present stage, because it's developing and we had adapted to the system yet. But roughly we have been able to touch around 16 to 17 villages.
Okay, so you're still at the pilot stage. So
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And it's being funded by?
This is being funded by the IFAD project, as well as by the government of Meghalaya, the Agriculture Department, and the State Council of Science, Technology and Environment, which are together working hand in hand for this initiative.
And I believe a lot of the participants who have joined today from all around the world, they can probably learn from you and get in touch with you, right?
Yes, sure.
Yes. So Rashid, I go on to you now for a concluding discussion on this technology issue. So indeed, I mean, globally, in whatever discussion I'm in, I mean, it all comes down to ICT. People are saying that it has to be ICT because we cannot be connected. We have to be remote. We cannot come together. So there has to be a new kind of markets. We should be digital markets. So this is the talk that is going on around the world. But also, I always think about it. I mean, let's say Bangladesh is opening up. I mean, I can see on the road, there are more cars now than there were 1 week back. So the situation is very, very fluid. A big question is some of these ICT tools that we're talking about might not be relevant in the future. So altogether, I just want your reflection on how you see ICT as a tool to address these challenges.
Actually, you know, I think we have been talking too much because ICTs on their own has a lot of limitations. So I think I don't consider ICT as a kind of a solution to the information access currently, or maybe in the future. All the examples which we have been seeing in India and outside is that ICTs are very powerful when it is combined with producer organizations, farmer groups, or in other words, where there is a social capital is built up. And then there is a strong coordination developed by the government agencies with the private sector. So I think if you have social capital, ICTs and coordination, then ICTs can play a lot of value. Otherwise, what has been happening is that in general, when the lockdown started, initially the response of the extension agencies have been to use all types of media, send SMS, send voice mail. It has been all focused around health issues, as I said before, on maybe washing hands, maintain social distances. Then it became moved into a kind of a crop advisory on what to do, when to harvest. So those kind of a thing, and a market information. But people need much more than that. So that is where some of the good examples, for example, like in Maharashtra, it's the farmers organizations who basically came up. They, for example, one of the example is the Abhinav Farmer Club, much discussed in India, the kind of a, which has about 265 farmer groups have been linked together, into which serves almost like 265,000 farmers. They basically even developed an app called which is called as the Abhinav Farm Cart app. This is basically that is created as an interface between the consumers who need the kind of, the fruits and vegetables and the producers who basically are producing it. And then through that app, actually consumers can make their, what is the quantity demanded, and they can always make the online payment. Farmers are being paid when they deliver exactly what the consumers need. So they were able to do many of those kind of things. That is online payment, but it's all possible because they use the ICT, because there are groups which have been working together and they could respond to the needs. In a sense, they could create an alternate, a new value chain. So this is what they have been doing. There are a number of examples from Kerala where actually, the WhatsApp basically played a major role. Again, it is basically the government setting up a virtual WhatsApp group of its, one is at their level in terms of district officials, senior officials, create a crisis management group, and you form new groups where producers as well as the consumers and the traders are connected together, where through WhatsApp they can share what is the quantity available, where you can pick it, what is the kind of a quantity. So I think you connect both these people, and even the price is even set by the government. There's a kind of a committee which is being formed. Another great example is the Pineapple Challenge from Kerala, an initiative where the Agricultural Officers Association started linking up, and they set up a kind of a virtual kind of a war room, a crisis management kind of a system, and developed systems where consumers can place the demand online and make the kind of the payments online, and the farmers associations are basically taking the lead in delivering, link with the transporters and linking the kind of a produce. I can go on maybe one more example. I will stop here because it is not merely the kind of a marketing. There are also people are using Telegram, WhatsApp, and even YouTube channel to share advisories to farmers. Even one of the examples which we also posted in our ESA COVID-19 website special page is about organizations like people creating YouTube channel, give the kind of seminars, lectures, kind of a thing. In the Telegram, you will have a discussion. Then you develop YouTube videos on the frequently asked questions. So people have been trying to do all these kind of a thing. And in some of the institutions have been also giving, like using Facebook Live on different topics. You are basically using and giving seminars, the experts talking to the farmers, people can register. So there are a number of things happening, but finally, all these things will work together only when the ICTs are linked to both social capital in the sense to organize groups of farmers, and there is a strong coordination, especially led by the government agencies with producer organizations and the private sector. I think I will stop here. This is a lesson that I would like to see. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. That's a brilliant point, I think. I mean, there are lots of nuances, but this triad that you're talking about, that you will need social capital, you will need some kind of a coordination, maybe a government or a private sector, whoever it is. Somebody has to be in a coordination role, and you're saying that that's when ICT can play a role. Without it, ICT itself, we can innovate, but it is not going to reach out to the farmers.
You'll be only pushing messages, but we don't know whether somebody is acting on it. That is it. Otherwise,
right. That's a fantastic point. Okay, so I mean, originally we planned to have a Q&A session in between this, but I can see that 33 questions have already been answered. There are 15 questions which are open. So I'm just wondering what would be the best model. To the participants from all around the world, there are 160 now. There are more people joining in. This is a 2-hour webinar. We have stretched ourselves. Don't be afraid. We have stretched ourselves because we thought that this is such a strong and important point that we do need to cover it well enough for you to be able to go back to your drawing board and use the information that we're using. So please grab a coffee, relax, and please join with us and hold yourself together because this discussion is just warming up. So, I will go on to Stuart. Stuart, you have been answering the questions. So pick one of the questions that you think was very interesting and you'd like to reflect on that to the audience who are listening. And the same with Rashid, same with Murray, and same with Putashin from Laos. So pick one question that you have already answered and you think it's very important, then you want to share it with the audience. So I give you a minute to reflect on that. And I also give a minute to the audience to reflect on what we have been discussing so far, take note, and then come back. So just a 1 minute pause for all of us to reflect on what we are doing. And then I'll come back to my speakers and I'll pick one question each from all of you. So please, 1 minute. Okay, so let's begin. Stuart, with you first. I keep on coming back to you as the first speaker. So which of the questions you thought was very intriguing and you'd want to share with the world?
Well, I hope you can hear. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
my internet.
Totally.
Okay,
totally.
okay, good. So there were many interesting questions, and I don't want to say this is more interesting than the others, but it's the one I have in front of me now. And it was asking about the what we call the village volunteers, or the key farmers, if we want them to go one step further, taking knowledge into the communities. How can we activate them to do that? And are we paying them to do that? Are we giving them any incentive to do that? We've been working with key farmers for many years, and we've been trying to find models that when we move on, that the key farmer will still remain like as a hub of good practice. Farmers will still come to them and ask some questions. But what we've been trying to look for is how to make them go that one step further. That it's not just people looking over the fence and can you give me some advice on how you controlled your whitefly on your tomato or something. That they actually go into the village and give information. And we don't claim to have the perfect answer at all. We're still really sort of digging into it and would love to work with partners to understand that better. But some two very interesting things came up for us, which I did mention before, but maybe I just elaborate a bit more. One in Uganda, the key farmers there. So to us, they're a standard key farmer. We work with them, they have the demonstration, and then we bring in groups of farmers to learn from that demonstration. A bit like a farmer field school approach, I guess. Sort of a very pragmatic farmer field school approach. But what we noticed in Uganda was those farmers, not all of them, but a lot of them, were actually going into their village and into even neighboring villages. They were so proud, so happy of what they could do on their own farms. They wanted to shout about it. And I found that quite incredible. Is that only Uganda? Can that happen in other countries? We still don't know. I think one of how we see it, that the situation in northern Uganda where we were working, farmers were exceedingly unproductive with vegetable. It wasn't a big thing at all before. It's mainly a field crop area, very low yields, etc. So when they saw the results of what they could get from relatively small plots of land, they were absolutely stunned. And I think they just want to share it. So it's kind of like relying, again, we talked about social capital before. And I think it's so true. If you've got that social capital that makes people feel that they want to share back into the community, it's an excellent thing. We could develop a method where we pay key farmers to do that. We're actually looking at that also in Uganda. We work in refugee settlements in West Nile. So some of the key farmers there, they're refugees from South Sudan. And our reason for being there, we use extension as a long-term sort of efforts to grow future input markets. We want them to take that knowledge back into South Sudan. So we're looking at models. Can we incentivize them? Because there's a lot of backs and forwards movement. Can we incentivize them to take that directly back home, rather than waiting, we don't know how long, 5, 10 years, until the refugees are all back at home? And then in India, we've been working with what we call village volunteers. And I think the very interesting thing there is not all of them, but probably 90% of them are women. These aren't key farmers. So we have our key farmer model, and then we look for volunteers in the village that can help take that message further. And it actually started because we didn't get women coming into training courses. So we wanted women to go out, to pull people in, to make them feel more comfortable, etc. And one of the reasons they do it, we give them a small allowance, we give them a bag full of leaflets, we give them a hat, etc., etc. But that's not the reason. One of the reasons they do it is because it gave them some, sense of fulfillment that they'd never had before, like respect in the community, which is often lacking, particularly for women. It gave them an opportunity to step up to, yeah.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. I think, the key message that you're saying is that, there are channels that are there, the volunteers, the lead farmers, and all sorts. So it's about linking them up. I think, that also would connect to the next question that we would have about partnerships. So I would park it there. Mary, do you have any quick reflection on the questions you were listening to or you're responding to? Any quick reflection? Maybe 30 seconds. Mary, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. I think maybe Gustus could be well placed too. I just like the way the discussion is going, and I think we all agree on the fact that ICT alone doesn't work, but on this importance how we combine ICT to continue to empower the rural poor, the social capital, the peer-to-peer mechanism, and ensure that no one is left behind. Because the problem also is that sometimes these groups may also engage the richer farmers. So we still have a last mile challenge to be sure that all these groups are inclusive, and how do we reach last mile. I also like all the topics and the questions on the pluralistic and how we can collaborate further with private sector, like what Stuart has presented is very great. And we have a lot of similarities of practice in IFAD, but I think we can gain really through this exchange of practices, and I see a lot of commonalities on what is going on. So I think for my 30 seconds, and women, of course, I would agree with Stuart, we have a lot of other examples where women play a key role in extension. In India, the self-help group movement is really powerful. And what we've seen notably that they are quite leaders in agroecological transformations, because they have much more at heart the issues of nutrition, health, safety, and things like that. So they've been really promoter on the kind of agroecologic or less chemical solutions that were put forth by Augustus. 30 seconds, that's largely enough. Maybe Augustus wants to share some things. Thank you.
Augustus, any reflection so far? Augustus, you're on mute. I can unmute you.
To think outside the box now on how do we disseminate training program to a community resource person at the village level, where there is no mobile connectivity. This is something that we are working out, looking at the indigenous knowledge that we had. We have some singing communities in our villages that can transmit messages through songs, and this needs to be incorporated into this. How to modernize this indigenous knowledge. That's how we are looking at as a project. And the use of lights. The torchlight was used as a message sent from villages to villages. So how do we use these the indigenous adapted knowledge that people had done earlier times when there are no other means of communication? These two, the singing, songs or whistling tones. So we have some villages that are using how to sing or whistle. For each name there is a song. So we are the only, we are the only country in the world that has this now at present. We need to adapt these for today's.
No, fascinating. What you said is so fascinating. By way of pushing in our exotic solutions, maybe sometimes we forget about the indigenous solutions. So that's fantastic. I have some reflection on that, but I don't want to take away much time from all of you.
Okay.
But yeah, so Rashid, shall I move on? Rashid, or you have a reflection?
No, I don't have any reflection. I think let's move on. We'll
Okay, okay. So I will move on for the sake of the time. So the third question is basically about partnerships. So we have been talking about the need, we have been talking about the challenges, we spoke about ICT, and then Rashid, you actually, I mean, let's say, created the foundation for this third discussion, which is about that we need social capital, technology service provider, the government, all come together. Otherwise, I mean, it's not a fix. So that's the third question. It's about, I mean, let's say how partnerships could work. So Putashin, I go to you. So let's go to Laos. So what's happening in Laos? So how are you partnering and how are you solving these problems through partnerships?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to actually hear from Marie that she said that we need to decentralize the outreach system in order to solve the problem, and that come into our suggestion that the roles of the farmer organization can be a partner for delivering services that directly to the need to the members. You know, in our organization, the Lao Farmer Network, we know our members quite well because we've been helping them in profiling, in assessing the needs and all of that. For example, due to the COVID pandemic, we realized that actually there are more than 500 members that need food pack to survive. Yeah. And for about 50 members, 22 farmer organizations need fund for the next production. With this, we are open to work with development partners and government to together to support our members. I mean, the farmer organization has a very important role to delivering services at the ground level, and normally the farmer organization can deliver service very fast and responding to the real need of the members. In addition to that, the Lao Farmer Network also raise awareness on the farmer voices, which leading to some positive changes. For example, in April last month, one of our members who produced carrot and beetroot in northern provinces, they cannot sell at all because even though there are some buyers already want to buy, but the transport was completely cut off due to the lockdown. So we produced a short video sharing the farmer voice on what happenings and what they are requesting for support in facilitating transport. After showing the video on Facebook page, and then the district governor saw the video. So at the same time, one buyer in the capital city also saw the video. So the buyer make a direct phone call to the head of the production groups and want to buy all the carrots and or the beetroot that the farmer has. So at the same time, the district governor also facilitate the transport by asking one of the transport company to lower the cost of transport. So by the end, the local government, the buyers, and together with the farmer organization can sell all the beetroot. So that one of the success story in showing the impacts of communication of the raising awareness on farmer issue can lead to concrete overcome of some of the problems. So I want to reaffirm the roles of FO in contributing in the decentralized audit system to in the time of
This is very good, I think, but I mean, we're talking about farmers organizations, and you're giving the example of a commodity, which is coffee, where the farmer organizations typically are very strong. But I mean, I mean, in your first example, when you talked about cabbage, I mean, do you have the same experience there? Do you have farmer organization in cabbage? Because typically we don't see those in let's say vegetable or perishable products.
There's a role to play there, but the cabbage problem haven't been solved. Actually, farmers have to throw away the cabbage or feed to their animals.
Okay, so
the problem there is no buyer in that time.
Okay, great, great, Futashin. To the participants, I mean, this is a question to you. If you have any example on partnerships, I mean, please put it on the chat box. And if you have any example on, let's say, case studies or any links that explains how partnerships are working to address this challenge, please put it on the chat box. And our back and support team, who are working very hard, will be taking note of those. So it's a request to all of you. So I move on to my next speaker on this issue. Sorry, sometimes my system takes too much time. So just give me a second. So, Stuart, I was supposed to go to you, but I mean, I would take a pause there. So just to give you a breather, I would move on to Marriott and Augustus first. So as a team, could you just skip from Stuart to Marriott and Augustus side, and then I will come back to Stuart later.
So for this presentation, actually, I want to leave the floor directly to Augustus. I'll take some key points more for the conclusion for the sake of time. His example is very self-explanatory and interesting. So Augustus, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mani. Well, this project is very well entrenched with the government of Meghalaya and is working to look at COVID pandemic. And we have a very high, the government has a very high level coordination committee at the state, the task force. At the district level, we have the district task force. At the block level, we have the block level task force. At the community village level, we have the traditional institutions as the main people, and the health group, the integrated village cooperative societies are the main voice of the people. So the project is well entrenched in working with the government. At the district level, the project managers of the project have been taken by the assisting the district administration in the task force and control room. So they control the calls that are coming from different communities, from the transporters, from the health department, and the information is collated at the district level. This information, if needed, it's transmitted to the higher levels in the state to ensure that whatever is the issues that has been addressed is taken care at a different level. I'll give you an example. This can be enumerated by an example. No, the villagers would SMS or would use the WhatsApp or would call saying that we have a lack of food in our house. This information is passing to the respective village organized village. We call it the Darbar or the traditional institution, who pass this information to the block office. The block office then passes it to the district administration. The district administration stops there and sees whether it can be tackled or not. But because movement from district to district is restricted. Movement from block to block is restricted. There are some produce that have to cross across 6-7 districts. There are some produce that has to cross 30 blocks. So the project managers that are at the district level, we coordinate one amongst another to say that, look, there's a village X that needs this much of rice. So the IT teams are called in, the IT comes in with the transportation, the food that is available in the district headquarters are loaded. This, as it moves, the information is transmitted to the block development officers, who then tells in the traditional institution to, this is the vehicle coming at this time, because every blockades. So the village organization knows that this vehicle is traveling, it comes in, so it's allowed to move, and the products, the food that is required by the self-help group or the integrated village cooperative society unloads the product, loads in the produce, and this produce is again collated where the market is required. So the same vehicle moves in through the block, respective block, through the district that is being coordinated at the district level by our DPMs, comes to the state, which is assisted by our state SPMU. This is how we are working hand in hand with the government to ensure adequate supplies of food items to the villages, and that there is also a supply of the produce to the cities. In the cities, at the localities have been given designated vegetable vendors who then list these vegetables as required. The mandis or the market that are there are closed, but now there's a farmer to locality distribution network. It's still in the nascent stage, just started just hardly 7-8 days, but I think over time we'll perfect the system of linking farmers to consumers direct.
Fantastic model, Augustus. So a lot of our participants are asking, how we are going to disseminate this information. So we will be sharing this information directly to you over a digest. You'll also have access to the presentation slides. But also, I want to make this announcement from Vcb-N's side, is that we are planning to put forward a COVID response site where you can probably have access to all these innovations that is happening around the world. So please, do keep in touch with the network. This is not just a one-way relationship that you're building through this webinar. I go on to Stuart. Stuart, over to you about the same question about how East West is creating partnerships. Jose, if you can move back to the slide on Stuart. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So partnerships for us, we're very much focused on, we have been focused on field-based activities, but everything we're trying to do is to bring knowledge and information on sustainable and profitable vegetable production to smallholders. We get asked a lot by different partners, can we do this also? Can we do that also? And there's always a temptation to kind of like broaden what we do. But we made a very clear decision. We're really good, I believe we're really good at what we do. We really understand how smallholders click. We have got very good expertise on vegetable production. But we really need to keep it in mind that we're just one part of a bigger picture. And we need to build up that bigger picture. If we just stay focused, training the farmers in the field on how to get good yields out of the field, all those missing links are actually missing opportunities. So going to partnerships where other partners bring in different expertise, which we don't have, for example, on access to finance, financial literacy, etc., financial literacy training, that adds value to what we're doing, and it certainly broadens the impact. And I guess one of the things that we talked a lot about during this webinar is grouping farmers, putting farmers together in groups where they can be more productive, where they've got better business opportunities in the future, and where it's an easier access point for service providers. And for us, working with farmer groups, you can send one message into a group and it gets disseminated around. So it's an excellent opportunity when farmers are grouped. Experience with us, we don't group farmers ourselves, we work with other partners to do that, but in some countries it's not so easy. Working in Myanmar, we were never very successful with that. But other countries, farmers tend to come together very easily. And yeah, organizations that can foster that and facilitate that really add to our work. Another big one, probably one of the biggest ones actually, is the advocacy for vegetables in itself. Vegetables tend to be neglected. I hope COVID, as one of the good things about COVID, has brought vegetables onto people's agenda. People are really aware now, vegetables, you need to eat them. They're really healthy. It'll build up your immune system. But we can't forget that. It's always been like that. Vegetables have always been good for us, not just because of COVID. It's not just the health benefits of vegetables which need to be pushed on the consumer level. And doing that on the consumer level, that's not something that comes with a 2 or 3 year project. That takes sometimes generations to really make that change, but it needs investments into that. It's also on the other side, which is more where we're looking on the smallholder farmer side, the opportunities for developing a business, growing vegetables. You see so many young people running away from villages. They've seen their parents, they've seen their grandparents struggling under the sun for what? For nothing. And they don't see anything in agriculture. They see moving towards the cities. Well, I think now with COVID, people are quite clear. You don't move towards the city, you stay back in your village. But what are you going to do? Well, vegetables does offer a very, very realistic opportunity, not just to survive, but to set up a business and to think business orientated. And yeah.
Sure, that's lots of, so thank you so much. I think, it opens up to the final discussion that we're going to have. You were saying that vegetables was not on the scene. I mean, when we were discussing about policy measures or what to do to make agricultural systems more resilient, if I'm not wrong, you're saying that vegetable was not a priority. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to different governments, different ministries many years, and in many countries, it's field crops are there because of food security, but people aren't investing into nutritional security.
Right.
And well,
great.
Understood, food security is priority number 1, but when you have that, you need nutritional security. It's for
right.
your future economy. It's the development of our kids' health, their brains,
right.
etc.
Right. In fact, all our data is suggesting that people have cut down on their nutritional food requirement, and it is going to have a very long-term impact on poverty. We just look at money as an indicator of poverty, but it's also about healthy people, right? So if people are not healthy, I mean, poverty is going to be far-fetched. So that takes me to my final discussion point, which is about what cracks in the system has been revealed or have been revealed because of COVID-19, what lessons we have learned, and what is the way forward. And what success models are evolving globally as well. So Marriott and Augustus, I go to you before I move on to Curl. So Marriott, over to you, please.
Thank you. Next slides. Okay. So yeah, that has been really a very rich and interesting webinar, and I really enjoyed the discussions in the chat and the convergence between all of us. I think from what we take in the lessons is, one is to strengthen our capacities to identify and anticipate issues, but also solutions coming from the ground. I think that has been a key lesson here, you know, how we don't get disconnected from the field. When you review also for the farmer crisis, like in Ebola crisis and other things, that was one of the key lessons. How do we quickly get, what are the core issues? How do we anticipate them? Because it takes time to solve them. So we need to look a bit forward on what is the next issue about the seeds for the things and so on. And this requires both investment in data, awareness alert systems, but also how we channel farmers' voice. And there is a strong role for farmers' organizations to be also strengthening their own mechanism to get the voice out, to collect it from the ground to the national. That's, I think, a very important investment that is already started in different areas, but we should continue doing that. Second, has been said, obviously, we need to invest further, of course, in these ICT4D tools. As it's been said, part of it is also the very traditional local ones. I mean, we don't have to forget about the power of radio and also simple printed things and phones and so on, and it takes time. I want to quote, I encourage you to read some of the latest Grow Asia study that reviewed the use of ICT among Southeast Asia farmers and provided some of the, and it takes stage, it takes time to go for more developed one, but we still go, of course, there are more and more better customized interactive ICT4D tools, and we need to invest on that. But as it's been said by all of us, that has to go hand in hand with social capital. These tools have to help extension, support actually community outreach, especially when there is no mobility, but in any case, because innovation also comes from the ground. So we need to empower this local farmers organization, this farmer, lead farmer, this community resource person. It's been said yesterday, we had another webinar, the youth has a strong role to play because youth is much more connected, obviously, than the elder one. So they can have a strong role and be empowered also to play this role of this interface. And link partners, because as it said, I mean, it doesn't come in a vacuum. I mean, ICT is a tool, so it helps us to help the community, the people to be able to reach around and also to link different partners. That's one. Third lesson, as it's been also said all along, is this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Where we have seen strong response, there has been a strong leadership. I think the example provided by Augustus on India shows really how the leadership was strong from very early stage, how they've put task force and coordination. And I think that's helped put everyone together on track, working 24/7. To collect this evidence, to be able to answer to the calls, but also to ensure collective actions. So role of government leadership, being able to adapt the extension institutions, the coordination system. For us, development agency, we've obviously tried to work together, and we need to continue working together because this is complex situation. We have a lot of learning to do, and we need to share our lessons faster and work together. In many countries, we work usually through the UN Coordination Task Force, and many of our country directors have been contributing to government policies and so on through this coordination. And here we don't have FAO or WFP at the table, but there will be another webinar next week from FAO will be participating. We need to join hand and really cross our lessons. Third, of course, as we've been saying all around, we need to empower and support our village committee, producers organizations, self-help group, federations, also from local to federations, both so that they can deliver services to the last mile. And secondly, also for the advocacy, because farmers need to be on the policy agenda. They need, at the beginning, everything was on the health. So there was a strong urgency to bring back on the agenda that farmers were also part of the challenge at stake. So there is a strong role to empower that and work that. And I think, as said by Stuart, this is a kind of public partnership, private partnership that we can work on, where you invest on farmers' organizations that are then better able to reach out and be in fair contract with private firm. So this is a kind of public-private partnership to work together. Because as the second last point, the next point is that we've seen also more and more private partnership. We've seen how there are different works, different innovations with value chain, ICT4D, logistics, and so forth. Fifth point, of course, is we've maybe not talked a lot about it, but when the crisis started, we were all at lost. What are we going to do? How are we going to work? What is going on? So we all reached to our networks, and they were very key. I saw all the blogs that came out were really useful. They came up very early, the Facebook, the things. I mean, Food for Cities network from FAO, I mean, thousands of messages were exchanged. So it enabled very quickly. There was this social, this networking that really enabled us to quickly get innovations and groups. And I think, as it's been said, beyond all these actors, one other thing that has played a strong role is to engage more at large society and consumers. And it's been said in the different example by Rashid. And even there was a very interesting ISA blog on the pineapple challenge, where also big pineapple quantity were just about to get lost. And this task force in, I forgot which state, just they came together, they both worked the IT, the market platform and so on, but they decided also to engage the consumers. They made broad media campaign, they distributed recipes on how consumers can buy a lot of pineapple, but also store them, process them, and they were able to solve the challenge in 1 week. So, I mean, we have to really be innovative. And also, I think consumers in this case, a lot of them have been also, civil society has been ready to try to engage and support the farmers. My last point is that all this has come up because there was such a strong crisis and momentum and so forth. But now we need to invest a lot in the capacity development and investment to strengthen this mechanism to respond in an agile way. And so there is a lot of work in institutional framework, institutions development, community and producers organization. And as it's been said, innovative 4-piece business model, because these ICT are not in a vacuum. I mean, this service delivery, this key farmer, they cannot be volunteers forever. And the farmers organization, the delivery of services, a number of these things requires public-private partnerships. So we need to find ways to also sustain this last mile delivery. It's not a completely free cost. So we need to also work on business model that can be embedded in value chains and so forth. And different partners are also working on that. And I think I may have had a last point, but that I can't see from here, but I think that's enough. And the last point, the good news is that all these investments are not only for COVID. I think all this investment, we've had also conference with climate change adaptation, is that all this investment will also help us strengthen our capacity to be more resilient and adaptive to crisis and climate change. So I think we need to link the two and also take these lessons to also mainstream better our resilience and climate change adaptation in our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. I think you have presented a very useful framework that we can all use to find out what kind of interventions we want to, let's say, decide. Carl, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. I've been quiet for long. I'm trying to answer many of the questions while I was quiet.
You have been doing an active listening for 1.5 hours. Kudos to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for still hanging on. We still have more than 130 participants, so quite impressive, I would say.
Carl, yeah, go ahead, Carl. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I'm trying to just come with a bigger picture here on it. So, as we have heard from all the presenters and what everybody listening to this, everybody is right now grappling with coping with this crisis that came up, and it's actually not for agriculture and for many people on the farm, it's actually not the scare and the COVID-19, but it's the countermeasurements of governments that is impacting people the most, especially in the rural areas. And what we have heard here today is that there's a lot of innovations going on how do you keep value chains moving? How do you keep your operations as a farmer moving during a lockdown, during all these measurements, during the scare of getting sick? And how do you keep information flowing from the farms to the extension workers and from the extension and advisory service back to the farms? So a lot of things have been talked about that in this webinar. I think what is very important is that we look at how do we capture all these lessons learned. I mean, this webinar is doing it in a very small way, but how do we do it in a bigger way? I could see on some of the questions coming in that they were saying and also in some of the presentations, that governments have had different strategies to deal with this dilemma of, on one hand, closing down society and at the same time keeping food supply, food security and agriculture running. So how do you close down society and keep parts of society open? Everybody has, as a government, has struggled with this alone. And I think it's very important, and I'm talking to IFAD here, I mean, that somebody in the world start to make some comparison between governments. What worked, what didn't work. So next time we are hit by a crisis, we capture the lessons learned here, and we have better, there can be a better global advice to governments. How do you square this circle of closing down and keeping open at the same time? So that was sort of on the big government level, because it has a lot of impact on farmers. Can they access inputs? Can they transport their things? Is the markets, the local markets opens? So it has a lot of impact on the farmers, how government reacts. And if government have a better understanding and toolbox on what are the consequences of strategy A compared to strategy B, I think that will be important. So that's one important global lessons to learn. The second one is on all the things about, I have heard people saying that, you know, we have been talking about digitalizing a rural advisory service and extension for probably a decade, and it have been moving very slowly. And there have been projects here and there in a relatively small scale. But right now, for the past 2 months, there have been a global experiment in doing this, coming as a lightning out of a clear sky. Everybody has been forced to try to go into digitalization to some degree, with all the pros and the cons that the other presenters have given. So we need to capture what worked, what didn't work. Again, we have done that in a very small scale today, but we need to do it in a much more global scale. And the organization, Global Forum for Rural Advisory Service, that we sit in, we definitely has a responsibility there. So we need to look in how do we do that. The third lessons captured that we need to do is how do we capture all these innovations that have been presented today that is happening on the ground. Innovations in how do people still market disrupted value chains? How do farmers buy inputs when they have no money in their pocket and they need the input for the next cropping seasons? So this health crisis doesn't turn into a global food crisis. All this, hundreds and as some of the people in the was writing, is that everybody knows the challenges, but where are the solutions? The solutions are out there. We all face the challenges, but the solutions are scattered. They are happening 100,000 places. How do we capture that, and who will capture that? Whose responsibility is it to capture that? I think that is 3 very important lessons learned that we need to get out of this, because in the medium to long term, we need to be better prepared. We need to have a stronger, more resilient system. And if we don't capture the lessons learned from how did we tackle this crisis, we will be in the same situation next time, that it creeps up back on us and we don't have the systems in place. So what some of the things, just stop me when I talk too long, right?
No.
Okay, so some of the things that I have seen is that, of course, several have said it, organized farmers who are organized are more resilient to shock than farmers who are not organized, because they can support each other, they can act, they have a network, which was also talked about. And still I have been in this business for several decades, and it has always been a challenge with organizing farmers. So is this a wake-up call? If we really get it out there, that we can prove that farmers who was organized were much more resilient and much better coped with this crisis, would that be an argument for farmers in the future to be more organized? Because farmers have to organize themselves. Nobody can organize people. It has to come from within, the desire within. So that's one thing. And then I think extension service generally have been ill prepared, because we have talked about, so the digital literacy among extension workers has generally been quite low, but also among farmers, right? So how do we capacitate? Maria was talking before about all this training and capacitating. How can we capacitate people, and here especially with digitalization, although it will not fix all the problems. It has its pros and cons, but we will go more into using social media, digitized things in doing extension in the future. I'm sure about that. And here again, the youth will play a big role. All of us presenting here today are a bit dated. Most of us, sorry, are a bit dated, and we are maybe not as, we didn't grow up with the digital age like the young people do. So getting the young people in the villages, in the extension service to be the front runners on this sort of change in the partly in the mode of doing extension, I think will have a big role. And we really have to find out that this, because digitalization doesn't work where we have no connectivity. So also farm radios, things like that, I think will come up again using this kind of media. How do we cost efficiently get to the last mile? That is the big challenge of rural advisory service and extension. Because, and again, I think this village knowledge workers or model farmers, there's a lot of things out there, but I think what extension have not been able to come up with yet is a cost-efficient way of reaching the last mile, especially in areas where you have no connectivity, where digitalization doesn't work. We still have a lot of work to do there, and we need to do a lot of experience capitalization to get there. And then I think we need to look for new partners in this more digital extension world. We basically need to go to the big tele companies, and we also need to talk with the financial sector. I think there is a lot to be explored in the combination of rural advisory service and agricultural advice with financial services using M-Pesa, whatever they are called. That's in Africa. I don't know what they are called in Southeast Asia, but this mobile banking. And I think because the tele companies, if they can see a business model coming out of this, and we can link agriculture extension to some of their services, because we need to go from project modality where we are now, where some donor funds 10 villages here and 100 villages there, to go to national system that really works, which means they need to be at least semi-commercially functional, because governments can't afford it. So it has to be a public-private partnership. And I think I don't know exactly how, but I think that there's a potential here we need to look into. So I will end at that saying the most important thing that we need to get out of this crisis is that we learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you so much. And then that last point that we have to learn from it is what is intriguing, because I mean, come 6 months later, if there is another pick and we say that we can't handle it and we fall back to the same trap, then it would be symbolic for all of us as a community. And it would be a waste of resource and time for us to be here for 2 hours talking all about these innovations. So I think that's where I feel responsible. I mean, when we're attending these discussions, we're responsible to use this learning to take it back and then use the lessons to draw something effective for our own countries. And public-private partnerships, etc. These are coming up. And we will be having one of our webinars on public-private partnerships. There are several offers that Vcb-N is launching. One includes the business model canvas training for pivoting. As we have been talking about that, I mean, the old solutions will not work. So what would be the new solutions? So we are bringing to you a training that is to support you to reimagine the future solutions given the current context. So that would take place if things go right from June 8th to 10th. That would be an online training course. We are also asking for blogs from all of you. So whatever you have as your experience, please write back to us. We will write those. So as you can see in this slide, we are taking 4 measures. 1 is webinars, 2 is the e-learning modules, 3 is blogs, and 4 is the country risk assessments that we have started to undertake. We also have decided to do one more thing. I'm putting it up as a chairman, but I mean, I did not get an approval yet. But what we envision to do is to create a website where you can all go and find all these excellent innovations taking place all around the world as cases, so that for agriculture, we know who is doing what and how we can collaborate with each other. And I also request all of you who have participated to please come back to us, tell us how we can collaborate with you and we can facilitate those partnerships. But before I end, I have with me Mr. Drupodo. Mr. Drupodo, are you there? I need to probably find you. Yes, I'm allowing you to talk, Mr. Drupodo. You are here today. So just from the participants' perspective, 1 minute, can you please share with us how it has benefited you and what maybe you would be doing going back to your desk? Mr. Drupodo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm speaking from India at the moment. I work on the mountains. I work in the Himalayas. So this webinar has been very interesting. We have been looking at livelihoods and development in the mountain areas. Also partnering with IFAD as a grant recipient earlier. I think I just want to put 2 points. What are the learnings that we have from the COVID situation? Insofar as the agricultural sector is concerned, and particularly when you're talking about smallholders and you're talking about the marginal farmers. Number one, if you look across the mountains, whether you're looking at Nepal, India, perhaps in Chittagong Hill Tracts, Myanmar, one of the things which is coming across, and during the discussions, in the chats, people pointed this out as well, or raised the question. Local is what has worked. And I give you one example. In Nagaland, in a village in Phek district, not only have been they able to take care of their food needs or consumption needs, but they have been able to help urban households in Kohima, supplying them, wild edibles and other vegetables which they grow. Now, how was this possible? It was possible through the linkage which could be established through mobile phones. So the first thing which comes across is mobile phones help, even if you don't have digital communication or good digital communication. Second is that local markets are important. While we are looking at value chains, we often tend to forget that what we look at is the markets which are far off and not see that there is a possible market which is nearby the local as well. And in such situations, it is the local markets which help, because the getting to the markets is not as difficult as if you had a market which is far away. The third aspect is looking at local crops and traditional crops which are there, particularly non-perishables. These are things which need to be promoted, not only from the point of view of, that people can access this locally, but also because these are nutritional, very valuable. And if promoted well enough, if you look at India, there are policy supports actually for some of these local crops with minimum support prices, encouraging farmers to get into this. This again builds up resilience, and that's absolutely important. Now, once you establish this, it's important to link up to the global value chains. And this is where what Carl was just mentioning earlier, harnessing the youth and their ability in being digital. So you combine traditional as well as local, bringing about or fairly good or robust value chains, and helping the farmers locally, also building up the resilience. Thank you very much for a very interesting webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Drupodo. I mean, the focus on local, I think it was mentioned a little bit, but you highlighted it as an important element. So thank you so much. That is also a very great comment that we will be working on. So with that, I thank you all, whoever was present from all around the world. I thank my speakers, Stuart, Marriott, Mr. Augustus, Carl, Kuchashin. Fantastic presentations, fantastic deliberation, very to the point, and we were able to finish it on time. I'm very sorry that I'm not being able to, let's say, allow other participants to talk, but we have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time, or maybe less, but our team will get back to you. Please keep in touch with us, and as I said, please share with us your reflections and how you think you can partner with us. Drop us a line, we will get back to you. I wish you all safety. Please be safe, keep your family safe. God bless you all. Thank you.